I think probably the other area that we're pretty keen to encourage, which is not a new technology because it's been around in Europe for a while, but e-call or emergency call. And that is where the vehicle can utilise automatic crash notifications. Criteria are met in a particular crash scenario, which might be airbag deployment, it might be about change in velocity, it might be a combination of different factors that then triggers a call directly to emergency services. So that's a technology that we're really keen to be able to encourage. We can't really encourage it as much as we would like at the moment because we need that infrastructure to be built out.
Well, Carla, thank you so much for coming onto the podcast to chat with me today.
Pleasure. Thanks for the invitation.
Could you start with like a 30-second elevator pitch of yourself? So like your name, the organisation you work for, and also maybe one thing that you're passionate about.
Yeah, so my name is Carla Hoorweg. I'm the CEO of ANCAP Safety. I've been there for just over 3.5 years now, and I'm really passionate about the work that ANCAP does and the opportunity that we have to expand our great track record in passenger cars into other vehicle types. So I'm looking forward to sharing a bit of that today and also later on at the summit.
So kind of starting very much from the top, which is what is ANCAP Safety's role?
Yeah, look, it's an interesting role. A lot of people think that ANCAP Safety is a mandatory government sort of system, and it's not. So we're actually the independent voice on safety for Australia and New Zealand. We are consumer focused, we're a consumer information organisation, and really our role is about providing information to consumers so they can make the best choice they can about the vehicle that they're intending to purchase, whether that's new or sort of recently used. We are aiming to provide reliable, trustworthy, independent advice about the safety of vehicles and to help consumers understand the different types of safety protection mechanisms that there are. So that's a combination of understanding that it's not just about protecting the occupants inside the car, but also protecting those outside the car. And more so now, we've got this new technology that's coming on board through a variety of different means that helps the driver to avoid a crash in the first place. So safety's sort of has been expanding for quite a while now, and we are aiming to, keep the protocols and the standards that we're testing to as relevant and as stringent as possible. So what we do with our star ratings is we do a detailed assessment of vehicles. We put them through a number of physical crash tests. We put them through hundreds of different active safety scenarios out on the track. We get a lot of information from manufacturers about the different safety features that are on board and technical evidence to support that. And then we issue a rating of between 0 and 5 stars based on the performance. The way the star ratings work is that there are points on offer. We encourage technologies by awarding points for them, and the points are structured in a way that we get the technologies encouraged that we're really trying to push or to focus on. But usually there's multiple ways for manufacturers to achieve that 5-star rating that they're trying to get to. They don't have to have every technology necessarily, but they do have to have the vast majority of the ones that we're trying to encourage. Probably the other point to mention is that we're complementary to the Australian design rules, which are the legal requirements, the base level requirements for a vehicle to be sold into Australia. Those are relatively low compared to what we have in our protocols and what we're looking at. It's very thorough. It's a very high benchmark for the ANCAP safety ratings. And we use that same set of protocols for Australia and New Zealand. So we're seeing, we're trying to encourage the same high level of safety into both markets. And our role is twofold. So we're trying to encourage manufacturers to deliver safer vehicles, and we're also trying to inform or empower consumers to better understand the safety features and choose the safest vehicles.
So, and I feel like this is probably a misconception other people have. I always thought with the safety ratings, it was kind of that you start at 5 stars and you kind of take them off, but it sounds like it's the other way.
That's right. You start with nothing and you've got to score points along the way. So yeah, it is quite a different system. And that's because when you look at the regulatory base, it's pretty low. A car that is, as you might say, street legal can get 0 stars in our system. And we've seen a couple of examples of that recently where, yes, they're legally able to be sold, but the additional safety features are just not there, or the performance is just not there in the areas that we look at. And I think a good example is vulnerable road user protection. So there aren't really any regulations around that. In terms of active safety systems, we look at adult pedestrian, child pedestrian, we look at cyclists, and since 2023, we also look at motorcyclists. So can the car detect those other road users and respond accordingly if there's the potential of having a crash?
I'm glad you've also kind of mentioned the ideas of technology and kind of the fact that, because ANCAP has quite a long history, you've been kind of a leader in vehicle safety for over 30 years at this point. I can imagine that testing methods have also evolved since ANCAP's inception. So how have those methods evolved, particularly with the development of these new safety technologies?
Yeah, so that's a really interesting point, because probably the methodologies have stayed the same, but what we test has increased. So the way we do crash tests today is still the same way that crash tests have always been done. But what we're testing, the speeds, the scenarios, the dummies in particular, have advanced significantly over that time. And really the dummies are a core part of that improvement in crash protection, because with the more sophisticated dummies, we get more readings from them and we're able to ascertain a greater variety of injury criteria and set more stringent standards. So the better the dummy, the more information we get, and the more we can kind of encourage manufacturers to improve with really specific feedback on how those systems within the car to sort of protect occupants are actually performing in those different crash scenarios. So when we think back when ANCAP first started, it was really one single crash test back then. Now we do 4 crash tests, but there are also additional crash tests that the manufacturer has to do themselves and provide evidence to us about. And then we've expanded into these active safety and ADAS test scenarios as well. So in addition to adding tests, we also increase the performance level that you need to get the same number of points every couple of years. So the protocols are on a 3-year cycle at the moment. And what we see is we might increase the percentage that you need to score in a particular test to get 5 stars. And then that flows down for 4, 3, 2, 1, 0 as well. So we've got multiple levers in terms of how we can influence the safety and the different specifications that we're trying to encourage, or different technologies that we're trying to encourage. So at the moment, we're testing to 2023 to 2025 protocols. The next set of protocols will come out and be implemented from 1 January 2026. But the changes that we saw in 2023 were quite a significant leap. We had autonomous emergency braking and lane support systems with this powered 2-wheeler motorcycle dummy, which was, the first time that's really been looked at on a large scale. And that's been really well received by motorcyclists, because it's the first time there's been sort of encouragement of cars to avoid those kinds of crashes or interactions with a motorcycle. There have also been a number of technological changes like direct driver monitoring, child presence detection, which is about detecting whether or not there is someone maybe left behind in the car when you get out in a child seat. Vehicle submergence is another area where, that's a very new topic, but quite a relevant one given the flooding that's occurred particularly in Australia, of the last sort of 5 to 10 years, we have started encouraging vehicle manufacturers to be able to demonstrate they can open the doors and windows after the vehicle's been submerged for a period of time. Really important for vehicles which have electric doors and windows these days, and also for EVs as well, that, you know, you've got that fail-safe power system that can actually ensure that people can get out in those situations.
You did mention one of my kind of favorite little acronyms at the moment, and I don't know if people might have caught it, but it was ADAS, which is, yes, I believe, Advanced Driver Assistance Systems, which is a bit of a mouthful, so I'm really glad ADAS exists as an acronym. How does ANCAP evaluate the effectiveness of ADAS, and what role do these technologies play in those overall safety ratings?
Yeah, so we're really focused on ensuring that manufacturers are encouraged to fit these active safety systems to their vehicles. They can help prevent or reduce the impact of a crash. You know, ideally, these systems are operating in a way that you avoid a crash in the first place, but in some cases, that's not going to be possible. So even taking some of the speed out, you know, maneuvering the car so that the impact's not as direct or not as great, can have significant benefits in terms of those scenarios where you just cannot avoid the crash. The elements that we're looking at are increasing over time. So it is an area where we're, as the technology evolves, trying to encourage these technologies. It does take a bit of time for them to be in market and operating before they go into the rating system. So we need to have a fair bit of confidence that they're actually reliable and operating to a certain standard. And that's a big focus of the current protocols. They are an important part. It's increasing in importance, and it is getting harder and harder to reach that 5-star level without having these systems on board. So you need both the sort of passive safety systems as well as these active safety systems. But the way our protocols are structured is that there are different pillars, and you have to score well across all of those pillars. So shooting the lights out in one particular area is great, but you have to do well across the other 3 areas as well. So it's designed, or the way the scoring is designed, is to encourage good all-round performance, so that a consumer knows that if they're getting a 5-star safety rated vehicle, they're getting good performance across all of those different factors, and they don't have to worry, well, did it do well in the active safety but not so well in the passive safety, because we've taken care of that by the way the rating system works. So the kinds of technologies that we're looking at with ADAS at the moment are really heavily focused on vulnerable road users, and also what we call safety assist, which is the ability of the vehicle to avoid or intervene in a scenario where it looks like the driver has either lost control, not paying attention, or there's some kind of emergency situation. So those technologies include autonomous emergency braking, lane support systems, which are around the vehicle trying to remain in its lane when certain things happen. So either the driver tries to steer out of their lane without indicating, and the car tries to direct itself back into the lane because it's recognising the line markings, or if there's no road edge, it's recognising that change from, you know, the asphalt to another surface. Occupant status monitoring, which is about seat belts. Are they on? Is there someone in the car without a seatbelt? And also driver monitoring, which I sort of mentioned a little bit earlier, about identifying whether or not the driver is potentially fatiguing or potentially distracted. And speed assistance systems. So the way we do the testing of ADAS is a little bit different to our passive safety. So we take the cars out onto a test track. We engage those providers to do the testing according to our protocols, and they do hundreds and hundreds of scenarios. Think about A, B, car to car. There's a whole set of different scenarios that we need to look at. And then we will run the test cars through each of those scenarios at different speeds. So the testing does take quite a bit of time. It is a few weeks usually to run through all of those scenarios, and then we'll, you know, do a whole range of different intersection or crossing or turning across path situations, so that we get a really thorough understanding of the car's performance. So it's not the most exciting testing to watch, because it's slow and it's the same thing over and over again. But it gives us a lot of information about the performance of those vehicles. It's very thorough compared to what happens at a regulatory level.
So you mentioned quite a number of technologies. Are there any particular technologies that ANCAP is expecting to see introduced into new vehicles over the next few years? And then I always like to ask people which ones they're particularly keen or excited to see roll out in Australian vehicles. So do you have any?
Yeah, so it's probably there aren't specific technologies that are really brand new categories now. And the physical design of the vehicle and the crash protection are always going to be critical components. So we don't sort of bring things in and then take other things out. So there will be a big focus in the protocols in 2026 on robustness, and that is around the reliability of active safety systems in a range of different situations to those that we've been testing. So more heading towards your real road environment, and also how human-machine interface operates for those systems. So rather than adding too much more new tests, it'll be refining the ones that are already in there. But I think probably the other area that we're pretty keen to encourage, which is not a new technology because it's been around in Europe for a while, but e-call or emergency call. And that is where the vehicle can utilise automatic crash notification. So certain criteria are met in a particular crash scenario, which might be airbag deployment, it might be about change in velocity, it might be a combination of different factors, that then triggers a call directly to emergency services. That is something that can happen through a third-party system at the moment in Australia. In Europe, this has been mandated since 2018, with some countries coming on board even from 2015. And we want to see the option available that the vehicle can notify 000 directly in the Australian case. But also this other element of data packets, whether you're using a third-party provider or whether the vehicle's contacting emergency services directly, there's a whole bunch of rich data from the car that can be transmitted and in the European case is transmitted to emergency services, which gives your first responders a whole bunch of information about where the vehicle is, where it might have moved to, number of occupants, potential information about the kind of crash that might have occurred based on airbag inflation or other sort of sensors in the vehicle. So there's a whole range of information that can be transmitted in a data packet, and that requires some work by the federal government in Australia to build out that technology base to allow that transmission to occur, and then for the states and territories to hook into that system and receive the data packet directly through to the first responders. So that's something that we see huge potential for benefit, particularly where you've got single vehicle crashes in those more regional areas where there might not be a lot of passers-by, and also in cases where you might be the only occupant in the vehicle and you've had a crash and you don't know what's happened. So having that ability to be contacting emergency services automatically can be quite a significant improvement in terms of that situation that you find yourself in and you don't really know what's happened, but there's someone able to talk to you and kind of give you that information that emergency services are on their way, and be a bit of a compassionate voice at the time of quite a critical incident. So that's a technology that we're really keen to be able to encourage. We can't really encourage it as much as we would like at the moment because we need that infrastructure to be built out. So we're working with the government, we're working with vehicle manufacturers and other stakeholders to try and identify a pathway through to see that rolled out more broadly. So there is a lot happening in our space, and we've got a very, very big agenda and a very heavy test program as we head into those 2026 protocols as well.
Speaking of agendas, you are actually presenting at the ITS Australia Summit in Sydney, which is on the 13th to the 15th of August. You've probably kind of given a little bit of a sneak preview of already what you might talk about, but what could attendees expect from your particular sessions at the summit?
Yeah, so the summit presentation will be more exciting because we'll have some videos and some visuals for people to look at as well. So we'll talk about the current testing and assessment program, talk in a bit more detail about some of the passive and active safety technologies. We'll have some recommendations for consumers who are looking to purchase a newer, safer vehicle, a bit more about some of the technologies to be incorporated into the test protocols, because we'll be a bit closer to that timeframe there. So hopefully we'll have a little bit more to share on what's coming. And then we can talk a bit about the different test programs that we're doing and what we're seeing in terms of those vehicles, particularly the light trucks, which we've advanced quite a long way with our light truck testing program. So we'll be able to start drawing some comparisons for consumers now between what we're seeing in light vehicles, passenger cars, and what we're seeing in other parts.
So my last question, which is, if people wanted to learn more either about you or ANCAP and any of the work that's happening, how could they learn more?
Well, our website is a hugely content-rich resource, so ancap.com.au. All our safety ratings are on there. So if you're looking for a new vehicle, if you're looking for a vehicle that might be a little bit older, we keep all the older ratings on there as well. So you can always go back through if you're looking at a secondhand vehicle and see what the safety rating is. The other resource which you can get to through our website is our YouTube channel. So if you like watching some of those videos, there is a whole host of them on our YouTube channel as well, and we're across all socials.
As someone who saw you present in another conference, I can very much attest to my internal organs kind of all clenching watching some of those videos and the near misses of the different vehicles. So they're definitely, I don't know if I'd say fun to watch, but they're definitely interesting.
Yeah, they give you a good insight into what we're doing in the test program, and I think they're very instructive.
Perfect. Well, Carla, thanks so much for your time today coming onto the podcast to chat with me.
Pleasure. Thank you very much, Emily, and I look forward to seeing you at the summit.
To learn more about any of the guests that we have on the Bite Size podcast, you can check out our show notes at compassiot.substack.com. Alternatively, if you'd like to know more about the company that runs this podcast, Compass IoT, you can visit our website, which is compassiot.com.au. Until next time.